Hello, welcome to King Kong Kids Story Time. We are continuing our reading of The Sign of the Chrysanthemum by Catherine Patterson. Chapter 14, Visitor. Fukuji lurched to a sitting position. It was not that a sound had awakened him, but the lack of sound. No clanking of pots in the kitchen or clop clop of clogs from the stones of the kitchen floor to those of the courtyard. No smell of steaming rice or hot bean soup in his nostrils. The boy had overslept again. With a grunt, the swordsmith slid out from beneath the quilts. Lately, Muna had been up before him every morning. Well, it was too good to last. No, not good. Strange. The night shutters were still in place. Fukuji shoved, and they thundered aside, flooding the rooms with the summer sun. Muna! The bedding was empty. To the market for food, perhaps? Fukuji rolled up both sets of bedding and put them into the cupboard, then down the stairs, slipping into the kitchen clogs at the foot. The charcoal stove was there. At least the boy might have started the fire before he left. The swordsmith picked up the stove. Once, when Muna had begun the fire in the house, the fumes had nearly overcome them both. Fukuji slid open the door. The boy was learning, though, today. His clog hit something soft as he stepped over the threshold. He caught his balance just in time, or he might have gone sprawling, stove and all, onto the cobblestones. A straw sandal. Slowly, Fukuji put down the stove and reached for the sandal. His gaze jumped to the storehouse door. It seemed secure, but the swordsmith knew. By the gods, he had allowed himself to hope for better. But he knew only a thief goes in such haste that he forgets his sandals. A chill went through his body, though the sun was already high and hot. He had hoped. He laid the charcoal and made the fire, working methodically, not allowing his mind to stray from its narrow occupation. He filled his lungs and blew steadily until the charcoal caught fire, then fetched the fan and squatted before the low stove, fanning rhythmically, willing his mind to quietness. When the noxious fumes had burned off, he carried the stove back into the kitchen, now keeping every nerve attentive to the sound of bubbling rice. Then, sitting stiffly on his feet upon the mat floor, he ate his meager breakfast of rice and pickle, chewing each bite with care. He rinsed his bowl and chopsticks in the water the boy had drawn the night before. Then, carefully, he swept out the house and kitchen. He worked with great vigor, and by the time he went out to begin sweeping the courtyard, even his powerful shoulders would have ached if he'd allowed himself to notice anything other than the motion of the broom against the stones. Swish, swish, swish. At the door of the forge he paused, but only for an instant, then he flung it aside. What an honor to meet you at last. The creature inside the room sat there cross-legged on the cover of the cold forge, a grin running like a long crack across his filthy beard. Fukuji lowered the broom and steadied himself with it. It was not a devil, but what mortal would dare enter this place? As if in answer, the ragged figure patted the forge. As a bed, it lacks something in comfort. I dare say. Fukuji turned his back and started toward the house. The devil, or whoever the stranger was, leaped nimbly from the forge and followed. I haven't much time, but I'd be glad to stop long enough for a cup of tea or, no doubt. Without turning, Fukuji entered the kitchen door, the tall stranger at his heels. They climbed into the mat room. Fukuji heard the man's clogs drop noisily upon the kitchen stones, as the stranger brought his large, dirty feet down on the clean matting of the room. "The wine is cold," said the unwilling host. The big hand went up in protest. "No need to warm it for me," his guest assured him. The swordsmith brought a bottle and 2 tiny cups to the low table. Without looking up, he poured. The man had his with a gulp, then smacked his lips appreciatively. "I have business with you, swordsmith." Fukuji waited. "You'll want to hear what I have to say." Still Fukuji did not speak, so the man went on. "You know, of course, who stole the sword?" Still no answer. "I know where he is. I'll get it back for you." He smiled and shook his massive head. "Oh, he's a little rascal, all right. You pity him, and phew!" He threw out his great hand. There was a ragged bandage on it. "But I'll get him for you." He leaned forward. "And the sword." Fukuji sat, not drinking, not moving, his narrow eyes set on the man before him. Of course, it was Muna's Ronin, risen from pretended death. The longer the swordsmith remained silent, the faster the Ronin spoke, cursing the boy and swearing by his own prowess to bring in the wicked to justice. "All you have to do," he concluded, watching the swordsmith as carefully now as Fukuji watched him, "when I bring the boy in with the sword, with the great sword, of course, is to give me one of your swords. Not a magnificent one, such as that Kerr has stolen. Just an ordinary." He smiled as if to acknowledge the contradiction in his words. "An ordinary Fukuji sword." His eyes slid from the other's gaze to the bottle. "Shall we seal the bargain?" "But you are mistaken." Fukuji's voice was even. "Nothing has been stolen." With that, he got up and retrieved the visitor's clogs from the kitchen. Kneeling on the edge of the mat floor, he leaned down and placed them noiselessly on the stones of the entranceway. He remained there, on his knees, waiting. After a moment, the Ronin stumbled to his feet and stepped down, forcing the tattered thong of the clogs between his toes. In the narrow entranceway, he turned and carefully measured the stiff form kneeling on the floor above. "He was a knave, but in the end a clever one, eh?" The Ronin paused, concentrating on loosening the dirt from under his left thumbnail with his right index finger. Then he nodded, lip thrust out. "An ancestry of rogues, but not a fool in the lot." "Ancestry?" Fukuji echoed the word as though it had been wrenched from him. Then he cursed himself for his tone and made a conscious effort to bring his feelings into tight rein. "Ancestry?" he repeated, tight-lipped. Takanobu saw it and smiled. "You are steel, swordsmith, tempered and polished. So polished. But," he waved his finger toward the other's nose, "I perceive a scratch." He drew his finger through the air. "A scratch," he repeated, licking his chops over the word. "Do you know the boy's father?" demanded the cold voice. "Do I know the boy's father? Ha, ha, ha." He stopped abruptly and pointed at his own nose. I am the luckless fellow." "You lie." Fukuji spat out the words. The Ronin squinted his eyes, not in anger, but simply to study his insulter. Slowly his head began to nod. Then his fists began to beat his chest. At last he was jumping in a sort of crazy dance, his wooden clogs cracking down against the stones of the entranceway. Laughing, laughing, laughing. The swordsmith watched in silence. You, Takanobu began to gasp out through his laughter. You, who would believe? You're jealous of me. And with that, he fell back into his hysterical mirth, now clutching his belly as though the agony of the laughter might overcome him. Fukuji waited, by the power of his will, keeping every muscle of his body in check. At last, when those sounds were no more than hoarse gasps, the swordsmith spoke. Show me the proof. What? He was still struggling for breath. What proof? The boy's a bastard. His mother's dead. But there was a tattoo. The boy told me. His mother had said he must look for it. A tattoo? A small chrysanthemum on the right, no, left shoulder. What? The laughter was completely gone now. So, you lie. Yes, no. Confusion clouded the Ronin's eyes and voice. Master, I was only bluffing. So I thought. No, you don't understand. The wretched Ronin pulled his tunic down off his left shoulder. It was there, a tiny, perfect flower. At last, Takanobu spit onto the stones. It broke the silence. You are a samurai, began the swordsmith. A Ronin, protested the man. A samurai. I expected you to bear full responsibility for your son's life and all his actions. Responsibility? Master, do you see me? Filthy, ragged, swordless? Have mercy. The words narrowed into a whine. Then, if you do not intend to act as a father, I give him to you. Takanobu threw both hands in the air. Every hair on his cursed head. I'll never come near him again. I swear. I swear. He slapped his hands to his chest. Just leave me alone. My pleasure, the swordsmith replied dryly. Besides, the old bravado began to seep back. There must be thousands of tattoos like this. Quite possibly. You know how these fool artists are. For you, something special. He pursed his lips in imitation. Special. He spat on the stones again. Yes, well, a good morning to you, sir. He ducked his head. No hard feelings, eh? I don't touch him. You don't mention me to the authorities. Agreed? So the rogue was in trouble with the authorities. Good. It would serve as the club he needed to keep the Ronin at a distance. Fukuji gave a nod that was both agreement and dismissal. When the clackety-clack of clogs in flight could no longer be heard, he brought the water and scrubbed the stones of the entranceway.